To call the Board of Adjustments meeting to order. Our first order of business, I'd like to introduce the members on board. We'll start with Dick Snyder at the end.
I'm Dick Schneider. I live at 113 Orange Avenue.
John Avent, 251 Burgundy, Fairhope.
Anil Vera, 701 South Mobile Street.
Troy Strunk, 411 Rockley Avenue.
Kathy Slagle, 147 Old Mill Road, Fairhope, Rock Creek.
And I'm the secretary, Emily Boyette.
Our first order on the agenda is case number BOA 17. I'm sorry. We need to have the approval of last month's meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I read through them. I don't see any problems. I make a motion we approve them as written.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anil, you'll need to abstain, please.
I will abstain. I was not present at the meeting. Motion carries. Our first item on the agenda is BOA 17.20 for 319 Equity, and I'd like the Fairhope staff member to please explain.
Mr. Chairman, the case before you for 319 Equity Street, as we discussed earlier, this is a rear setback line adjustment. This case was actually considered by this board in December, was tabled to the current meeting where we are now. The applicant decided to modify their request, and as a result of that modification, required tabling it to this next meeting so that both the applicant and staff could adjust the request. And Mr. Chairman and members, what I'd like for you to do is in your packet on page 5, there is an aerial photograph, and we'll use that for reference as we describe the request of the applicant. You'll notice in the packet right there, we have a call out line showing the narrowest lot line. So the question here is the request of the applicant is they wish to, in lieu of the current 35-foot rear setback on the property, their request is to treat it as a side setback, which would only be 10 feet. So what we've called out here, you'll notice there's a 20-foot lot line that is the narrowest dimension, contiguous to the right-of-way. And it's at the very top of the subject property. So we called out subject property, as you see right there. So I put in the packet the various definitions of front lot line and rear lot line extracted from the zoning ordinance. The rear lot line that corresponds to this 20-foot front lot line is the 152.5-foot lot line that you see at the bottom of the picture. So the request will be, of course, to treat that setback line that builds off the 152.5-foot lot line, treat that as a 10-foot setback rather than a 35. Mr. Chairman and members, the staff recommendation is denial of the request, and the basis for denial is that this is a clear definition of lot lines, front and rear, and setbacks as indicated and as depicted in the City of Fairhope zoning ordinance. Evaluating the request and evaluating the property, the additional basis of denial is that we do not see a hardship created by the size, shape, and topography of the lot that would preclude its use for residential purposes. And so therefore, staff's recommendation is for denial.
Thank you. We'd like the applicant to make a presentation, please. If you'll please state your name and address for us.
My name is Edward McMurphy, and I live at 17861 Section Street in Fairhope. And I'm here really representing my wife and my stepdaughter. My stepdaughter's the owner, and my wife is a realtor. And so I think that my wife and my daughter have both contacted both neighbors, and both are in agreement that they're in favor of this being approved. Because of the shape of the lot, it kind of calls for 3 35-foot setbacks on these different angles. But in fact, and I know what the gentleman here said about the rules in Fairhope, but really, there's a front setback, and then there's an angular angle, and then there's a long side lot, and then there's a back side lot. And what we're asking is that the side set lot that is currently 35 feet be changed to 10 feet. And the neighbor on that side has no problem with that, because they want to see a single-story house built on this lot. And if the current setbacks are upheld, then this lot has to have a 2-story house. And then on the left side of the lot, they have no problem with it either. So all we're trying to do is get these setback lines set such that the house that will be built on this lot will aim in the same direction that the 2 houses on each side of it are aimed in. And there's nobody against it. So I would appreciate, and Knox would appreciate, the consideration of this board to approve that change.
This lot, this house is going to face this way?
May I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so on this map right here or the survey that they've given to us, the 152.5
Is the 35.
okay, that's existing. So the part of the lot that's 152.5, that side has a 10-foot setback. Is that correct, staff?
Mr. Chairman, that is the rear lot line, so that actually is a 35-foot setback. Yes, sir. The existing setback is 35 feet. That corresponds to the 152.5 lot line.
Okay. So this is for the staff. So when you're standing at the road looking at this property, it seems to me, what is the front? Is it the 20-foot or the 118 front?
20
I think it's the 20.
20.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The 20-foot lot line, by definition, is the front lot line associated with subject property. And if you draw a perpendicular line intersecting any point along the 20-foot long property line, it will intersect with the 152.5-foot long property line.
You mean this one, 151.3?
Yes, sir. Well, and sir, for what I'm reading is off of the parcel viewer, so there may be some slight variations, but we are discussing
But it's
the same
that line.
property. Yes, sir, it's the same property line.
Because you're saying that if it were perpendicular, it would hit that line.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is the side, this is the side.
So, may I ask the staff, so the houses to the right and left of this, the orientation, what is the orientation to the house to the right and left? It's facing straight forward, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes. It's facing It's facing towards Equity Street and towards Nichols Avenue. Both of those lots are. And that's all we want to do.
And this is a question for staff. So if the other two houses to the right and left are facing that way, why can't we use that long, I guess it would be the, lost my directions here, the 118-foot as the front?
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go.
as far as what the front yard is, that is defined by the zoning ordinance. It doesn't matter what we think it should be.
Okay.
It defines the front as the narrowest dimension facing the street. Now, as far as the building orientation, that's, in my opinion, for our review of this variance, that didn't factor into it, because you can orient a building however you want to, really. What we looked at is the setbacks, and is there a reasonable use of the property under the current setbacks, and we feel like there was. But as far as how the front is determined, that's determined by the ordinance and how it's defined.
That's it.
Mr. Chairman, that's actually a common question we receive, is differentiating, like Wayne was saying, differentiating building orientation versus lot frontage. And like Wayne was saying, lot frontage is going to strictly be interpreted by the requirements of the zoning ordinance.
So if this was a rectangular lot, it'd be a lot easier to define.
Right, it would be.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And so what we do in this situation is fall back on the ordinance. And so I included it in your package. It's actually direct quoted out of the ordinance in your packet on page 4. And the terminology they use is the least dimension contiguous to the right-of-way. And in this case, the 20-foot dimension is the least dimension.
That's it. Oh, sure, go ahead.
So,
I had something, Buford, on this, and I've been struggling with this pretty much all day, and reading the ordinance, first I didn't understand it at all, but reading the ordinance and thinking about it, it kind of makes sense that the lesser dimension is the front setback. I understand that. But then again, the ordinance was really geared towards a corner lot within a subdivision, a rectangular lot that's on where you have a side setback and a front setback. I mean, a side street and a front street. With that, what the ordinance is trying to force you to do is face the house towards the smaller side on a corner lot. And, you know, once I drew it out and started looking at it, it makes sense that it's trying to draw you towards this. But looking at this piece of property being irregular, I understand it meets exactly the ordinance, but what's around it, let me say this. The fruit nut section is nothing typical about the fruit nut section. Everything about it is non-conforming. The lot sizes are non-conforming. Most of the houses are non-conforming. Everything about it. This is a irregular lot. There are houses that were built all the way around surrounding this particular lot. This is the last one in the neighborhood. And to me, if you go to the original plat, it kind of forces you to have the back of your lot face, your back of your lot is backing up where someone else is looking at the back of your house. And it you know, it doesn't have any symmetrical feeling to it. It's to make it look hodgepodge. And I respect what the ordinance says. But then again, this is a kind of unusual situation, in my opinion, you know, being so irregular. You know, and I know that this board has looked at several lots that with setback issues and justified because of building area and being irregular. So that's just my take on it, if I really make any sense from what I'm trying to say here.
Looking at the, I guess, survey, I think it's page, doesn't have a page number on it.
Last page.
There's existing, this is existing, and this is the proposed. The only thing he's asking for is this being, instead of 35 feet, being 10 feet.
Oh, okay, that's why I'm, and which way would a house fit on this? Show me, just draw it,
Just like that.
okay. And this one's gonna sit that way.
Yes, and then this one faces this way.
Well, this one's got a 35-foot setback on the number 2 lot.
What he's trying to do is create a larger building area that, and still use the front setback as the front setback, but rotate the house, being a larger one-story house towards equity.
So back this way. He wants to move this line back to 10 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, that's, no words, I'm sorry. This would be 10 feet here.
Right.
Yes.
So
Okay.
this would come like this
Yeah.
comes
Sure.
like this, so the house is going to sit like this.
It looks to me
Yeah.
that, well, first of all, the house to your west is facing Nichols Avenue. That's the front of their lot, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right here. And it seems to me that if you use the dimensions and the setbacks the way the city of Fairhope is suggesting, that you actually have a much longer lot to build on, using your 35-foot setback on the 20-foot and the 35-foot setback opposite that. Your lot is much longer to build on. I don't understand your reasoning that you would have to build a 2-story building there, and actually, it would face almost the same direction as the house on Nichols would. Your sides would be together.
Yes.
The house on Equity might not be at the same angle, but because of the curvature of Nichols to Equity, you're never going to get your houses all together. I think you actually shorten your lot when you are wanting to use the other segment as your 35-foot
Why
setback.
couldn't they just move it like this?
Well,
So I don't understand the reasoning why you'd have to build a 2-story house by using the city of Fairhope's setback suggestions.
well, all I know is that the purchaser for this lot hired a...
I can't hear, why don't you speak into the mic?
The purchaser for this lot hired a contractor that laid out, a house for single-story, as well as one for 2-story. And they said that they needed the setback to be changed for single-story.
Yeah, I just don't see that on the dimensions.
But also, I think it's important to note that the neighbors were in favor of it. And I think that, I just think it's worth considering that if the neighbor on the right and the neighbor on the left have no problem with it, that it's kind of reasonable. Anyway, but again, I'm here on behalf of my wife,
They moved that house over
and
there.
I don't know as much about this as she does.
Like
She's
this.
out of town.
That setback, so why don't we
Thank you.
just propose it?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Just,
That's what they're doing,
I don't see it.
right here. Outline is now 10 feet.
Yeah, but
Instead
they,
of 35.
yeah, but why not move the house? Well, you got the house moving over there already. If this is the right size of the house.
I don't know what the size of
If they move the house over in their layout to the 10-foot setback line on the, let's see, on the 106-foot side, and they put it right up against the 10-foot setback. Couldn't they get just as big a house as what they plan on doing?
I don't think they could. I think that added 25 feet that we're asking for
I mean,
would
you
give
just
them
look at the
more,
size.
more room.
Build the house this way.
I mean, they're trying to just build a single-story house, and I think
It's
that gives them a
along this
bigger
one.
footprint. I'm not saying it's significantly bigger, but it's bigger.
Well, are they putting the house on, as close as they can to this 10-foot side?
I don't know. I don't know.
They haven't proposed a layout of where they're going to put the house? Would seem to me like if you did that, you might be able to cut this setback down instead of
That's what I'm saying.
35 feet.
The
Maybe you
house-
could get away with just 10 feet.
The house has got,
Well, I mean, that might be right, but, I mean, what we're asking for
you got a much.
is really just
longer
25
house.
feet on that southern line.
Using-
And in that the neighbors don't have a problem with it, it just doesn't seem like it's that unreasonable a request.
I don't think it's unreasonable at all. But,
I mean, if someone,
Well,
if someone had an argument with it that has a, has a
A dog in the fight.
a dog in the fight, yeah, then I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, I understand that, but we seem to have everybody on board.
Mr. Chairman, if I can address that comment, when staff looks at these and makes recommendations, we go by the ordinance, which provides criteria. Not trying to be cute, but the ordinance doesn't provide any information about concurrence from neighbors. It has criteria that we use from lot to lot, any place in the city. And I think it's important that, and we have made a very diligent effort to use that criteria, explain our rationale for that criteria, because we want to be consistent in how we're looking at that. But as far as the neighbors, I understand the point, but from our perspective, that was not a factor in our recommendations because neighbors change, people move, those kind of things, and just want to make sure
Well,
that we explain that.
yeah, but if they build a house and nobody disagrees with it now, what is the point of bringing it to here if we're going to follow the exact letter of the code? Either we can approve a modification of this nature or not. And if we can approve it, then I think giving the person another extra 25 feet of this area, I don't think it's going to bother anybody. It's just going to make a better house.
And let me also explain that, when you look at variances, what we're saying is that everybody else has to follow the rules except when someone asks for a variance. So we're allowing somebody to deviate from the rules that everybody else has to play by. Everybody else, I mean, you have a person buys a lot, they come in, they know the limitations of it, they build a house, that's all good. But
Well-
a variance allows people to differ from those regulations, so we're giving them a right that other folks don't have.
Right.
When we look at it, we look at from the perspective of the variance, and this is pretty much standard throughout the United States when you look at variance, some of the law behind variance, is there a reasonable use of the property without the variance? If they can reasonably use their property, then a variance should be very difficult to achieve. Wanting a bigger house is typically not something that is grounds for a variance. That's just not how it's written, wasn't how it's designed. So we look at it from the standpoint is, can this property be used with a reasonable use of property? Now, there are occurrences, we've seen a lot of things happen where the setbacks make a building. We have one right now that you could build 4 feet wide. Well, obviously, that's criteria that's grounds for a variance because we've eliminated just about any reasonable use of the property. But when you have these properties that can be reasonably used, a reasonable house can be built there, then that makes the variance very difficult, in my mind, to prove. I believe Buford has looked at some of the surrounding properties and the size of those homes, and Buford, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that a house of similar nature could be built under the current setbacks from the neighborhood perspective of the homes that are adjoining it. Is that a fair statement, Buford?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. So, and you'll see some language in your packet reflects that. that we don't believe a hardship is demonstrated by the size, shape, topography of the lot that would preclude reasonable use of residential, would preclude a residential use of similar size to the adjoining properties.
But as a follow-up, we absolutely respect the board's decision, and when you guys make decisions, we carry those through, and when someone comes in to construct, once they've got a variance, we will absolutely follow the variance that's been adopted, but we do, understand the position of the board, and we're willing to follow through with whatever that y'all decide. I just want to make sure that you guys understand where we're coming from when we make recommendations to you, and what the criteria we're using, and what we feel like is the best practices, not only from Alabama, but from the United States when it comes to variances, because just about all the states enabling legislation for variances and so forth come from one document. It's Standard Zone Enabling Act that was passed in 1926, and has some of the very same language from place to place to place, from state to state, and then, of course, the city ordinances are in conjunction with that state legislation. But we take this very seriously, and we try to do the best job we can, provide the best information we can, and the best advice we can, as consistently as we can, and I think in your staff report, you'll see that in there. But again, we're looking at it from a reasonable use of the property rather than we want to, help somebody out. That's not part of our review.
Well, in all honesty, I think that letting them build a bigger house or whatever there is just more tax dollars for the use of the property.
If that was the case, we wouldn't have any setbacks, and we let people build to the property line, if it means more tax
In
dollars.
this particular instance, there are so damn many variances in this particular city, and I happen to live in it, right on Orange Street, and I know exactly what you're talking about. However, by making this person comply with this particular ordinance doesn't seem reasonable to me. I think we ought to be trying to get the nicest homes we can built in this city, not built to some abstract code that happens to belong to rectangular lots. It doesn't belong to this particular kind of thing. And I think if you took it back to the city or to the council and said, well, we thought this was very reasonable, and it's better for the whole neighborhood because it's a bigger piece of property, it'll be a higher tax rate, blah, blah, blah. So why, I don't see a reasonable approach to this on just following the code.
Mr. Snyder, we absolutely respect your opinion, and understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
Is there any more, if there's no more discussion, I'm ready to make a motion?
We need to open the public portion.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the public portion of the meeting. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak for or against this? Okay. I'd like to close the public portion, and we'll have the board. Do I hear a motion?
I still have a question. So what's does anybody know the buildable square footage of the by right condition?
I think it's on the back of the proposed survey, isn't it?
That's what I was looking for.
15,000.
That's the buildable?
That's the building envelope, I believe it's.
Or is that the lot?
No, that's the lot, I'm sorry, that's the lot.
Where are you getting those numbers?
He's reading off the survey.
That's this one right here.
That's right. That's the proposed. So this property essentially has 2 rear yard setbacks, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So,
Yeah.
as you'll see, it actually, both if you'll notice in the existing condition survey, so you do have 2 35-foot setbacks applied to it.
Wow,
Really, three.
why is that?
Three. Yeah, three.
Well, yeah, front side, we
Yeah,
talked
the
about rear
front
setbacks.
and the
but
side
why-
and the other side.
Well, here's
Why
another
do you
one.
have two I mean, we do this all the time, as you know. and-
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, then again, if you go by the ordinance, I can see this existing
Well, here's-
lot, this existing, excuse me, Dick, this existing lot being just like it is, but one of them needs to be a side,
Well,
which would be the rear, where the lot 2 is, that has a 35-foot rear setback, but I guess they just lined them up so they can all conform.
apparently so, and Mr. Chairman, you were unable to attend the meeting where we previously heard this case, and I'll make this very, very brief. The original recommendation was actually for the other 35-foot setback to treat it as 10 feet, and we actually recommended approval of that, but the applicant voiced into and verbalized into the record a request to change it to the current recommendation. That's why, when it was originally heard, it was tabled to the current meeting. So what that triggered essentially was the definition of front and rear lot lines, and therefore the application of front and rear setbacks current to and subject to the discussion we are right now. So what that did, the change in recommendation actually made it very, very clear from a staff interpretation staff interpretation standpoint of the zoning ordinance. But the previous request, actually, we recommended approval due to that same irregularity, as you see where you have a partial contiguous area to Nichols Avenue and Equity where they can join. But as we discussed ad nauseum earlier, now we're considering the least dimension contiguous to the right-of-way, which puts us in the case before you today.
And the rear yard setback, it's pretty simple in the ordinance. It says the opposite of the front yard setback. That's how it's defined in the ordinance. Nothing more, nothing less than that. The front is the side with the least dimensions on the right-of-way, and the opposite of that is the rear yard. And that's as much as they give you.
And that's the reason that had, in your department's opinion, that if they would have requested the side yard adjacent to the other lot 1, you would have recommended approval.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Strunk, that's correct. The original request that was heard in December, the original change, the original request for variance, was along the 57-foot-long property line, which would be the southeast portion. Now, it also has a 35-foot setback applied to it. Now, without going into unnecessary detail, of course, the opposite lot line of that, a portion of that lot line is contiguous to the right-of-way. And I think that's why the original surveyor drew the lot the way they did. That recommendation was actually for approval, and we believe that there was a case for a hardship due to a peculiarity specific to that lot, because that language is definitely in the zoning ordinance. But the recommendation changed, or the request changed to the request that we're considering today.
I would just like to make one comment. It seems that what we're asking for is logical and reasonable. And there's no opposition to it from neighbors. And in the existing survey, there are 3 35-foot setback lines. There's the one from the front, the one from the back, and the one from the side. But in almost all lot surveys where you have a rectangle, there's only 2 35-foot setbacks.
Correct.
And there's 2 10-foot setbacks. It's only because this lot is so irregular that we're here asking for some help. So
And I think it
anyway,
is reasonable.
I think it is. But I know it's up to you guys, and I appreciate your consideration.
All right. Well, what do? Do we vote on this? Mr. Chairman,
We would need a motion.
I move that we approve the variance. Any second?
Motion fails for lack of second.
Okay.
Do we need a motion the
May
other way?
may I say something,
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I came in here with all the intentions to feel like this was a right justification, but I missed one valid point that Wayne brought to us, is that you do have a buildable
Yeah.
lot. You can build a house on this, and it is a proper size lot with the setbacks to build a nice house. The variance has to be some kind of hardship, and irregular shaped lots is part of a variance. But if it's irregular and it had a tree in the way, or we're trying to save a tree, or it, like Wayne was saying, if it was only 4 foot wide of building area, that's a hardship. But, looking at this lot, I think you have a lot of room to build a structure. And that's my
Well,
hang up with this. And I respect what you're saying. I wish there was some way it could be done differently, but just because you want a larger house and the property owners on both sides are agreeing, it's still not a hardship, in my opinion. That's the hang up I have.
Yeah.
And I came here with an open mind and really want to approve this thing, but
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that this lot is under contract to be sold, that the buyer needs this extra space in order to build a single-story house. They don't want a two-story house. And so I think that is a hardship. But,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if there is no more discussion on the board, I believe the variance request is not warranted, and I make a motion to deny the variance.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
You want a roll call?
Yes.
We'll do a roll call. Dick Schneider,
No. Nay.
John Avent,
Yes.
Anil Vera,
Yes.
Troy Strunk,
Yes.
Kathy Slagle.
Yes.
Motion passes.
thank you.
All right, let's get on with it.
Our second Board of Adjustment is BOA 18.01 for 362 South Greeno Road.
And Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the request before you, 18.01, the applicant wishes to construct a storage facility at the subject property, as you see in your packet, and looking at the zoning classifications of this being M1 zoning, that is an allowable use, however, it's not allowable by right. This requires a special exception to allow storage units, which therefore requires approval by this board. Staff recommendation is for approval, and Mr. Chairman, the basis of the approval is that immediately north of, and if you look at the second page of your packet, we've taken the same zoning map, color-coded zoning map, zoomed it out so you can see the surrounding properties a bit easier. You'll notice that we've created a call-out where there is an existing storage facility immediately north of where the proposed storage facility will be located. Because of these compatible uses, as well as the compatible uses existing surrounding it, there's an HVAC contractor, some other industrial type of uses. Because of this compatibility, in addition, there are existing structures that face Green Road, that front upon Green Road, that actually shield it. There is a veterinary clinic that somewhat shields the existing storage facilities. Fairhope floor covering will also partially shield the proposed. In addition, Mr. Chairman, the proposed structure does not trigger the requirements for a multiple occupancy, and it also does not trigger the requirements for a site plan review. So the only action here would be the granting the special exception by this board, which staff recommends approval.
Thank you. I'd like the applicant to speak and just name your name and address for us. Thank you.
Yes, sir. My name is Dr. Lance Hill. I originally built Fairhope Animal Clinic and owned that piece of property. Sold it to Dr. Cordy several years back. I own the property to the north of there, the storage units, and I'm just asking for a permit to build storage units on a piece of property that is zoned for storage units, basically.
All right. Thank you.
And sounds reasonable to me.
Is,
Do you have any questions?
do you have anyone from the public that would like to speak for or against this project? Okay. We'll open and close the public portion. Do we have any?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead, and I think I'm probably going to just go ahead and make a motion to approve this application as requested.
Do we hear a second?
I second.
Second, we'll do a roll call.
Dick Schneider.
Aye.
Dick?
Okay.
John Avent.
Aye.
Anil Vera.
Aye.
Troy Strunk.
Aye.
Kathy Slagle.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Do we have any old or new business?
Yes, sir, Chairman. We will have 2 cases next month. And I will also have the new deadline schedule for y'all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I get just a few quick comments?
Sure.
And I don't want to sound like we're overbearing. I don't mean to be overbearing, but I do want to convey to you guys, we are absolutely trying to go through the criteria and give you guys the best advice we can. I know sometimes it seems overbearing, but we take this very seriously, and, you know, people come in and comply every day. In our opinion, a variance is a right you're given based on circumstances, and so we take that very seriously. We want to make sure that, you know, we don't want to be overbearing, but we do take it seriously, and we appreciate the job you do and your opinions. I mean, obviously, we can have different opinions, but I appreciate and respect all the opinions that the board has, and is willing to work with you guys any way we can. So I just want to tell you thank you, and we don't want to be overbearing, but we do take our job professionally and seriously and want to be consistent. So I just want to make sure we convey that to y'all.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.